After 10 years of working in high stress tech corporate environments, Ali hit rock bottom and was waking up with debilitating anxiety, brain fog, struggling with depression, adult acne, and operating in a perpetual state of fight or flight. In 2018, Ali quit her job as an engineering program manager, sold all her belongings, and left San Francisco on a one-way ticket to Central America to teach yoga on a boat in the Caribbean. She traveled 16 countries and 5 continents in search of meaning, healing, and answers. It was existential inquisition that led Ali to explore and study a wide variety of healing modalities, from meditation to Reiki to sound healing to ayahuasca in Peru. Ali dabbled in almost every alternative healing modality you can think of until one day she discovered breath work. Through breath work, she was able to restore her battered nervous system, relieve anxiety, and find her voice. She learned how to use her voice to calm her nervous system, and in the process found a quality of her voice she didn't know she had. Ali then began to study sound healing using Himalayan singing bowls, as well as a wide range of other instruments. After a very long journey, Ali found light through the dark night of the soul. Through her struggles with anxiety and depression, she's learned how to raise her vibration and energy and made it her life's mission to help others. So using breathwork, sound healing, and voice activation, Ali now facilitates ceremonies for groups and individuals to reconnect with their true nature and to awaken their voices. Through healing and trauma, Ali's hope is to remind the world of this fact, not only through the work that she can do, but through sharing her story and reminding people that they are not alone on this journey. I'm so excited to have you on our podcast today, Ali. It's such an extensive bio, but I'd love to just hear it also from you. Like, can you tell us a little bit about your experience in work, and then how that created this level of stress and anxiety and led you to where you are today?
Thank you so much. Yes, of course. And it's great to be here. So thank you for having me. Yeah, so I went on quite a journey. So back in 2018, I was working in San Francisco. I had climbed the corporate ladder. I was working the dream job, living the quote unquote dream life. I chased an electrical engineering degree to ultimately reach this place, what I thought was ultimate success, only to find I was absolutely miserable, and I felt very lost. I felt very confused, and not to mention, as you read through the bio, I was struggling with severe anxiety, depression, brain fog, which made matters incredibly difficult for a high stakes tech job. But also, I was desperate to find answers, and so I threw myself into yoga in search of some answers, and ultimately did my yoga teacher training while I was working a full-time job in San Francisco. And I thought, YOLO, after getting my yoga teacher training, I quit my job, sold everything I owned, and booked a one-way ticket to Panama to explore this other lifestyle. And I was really in search of answers. And so I went a year and a half around the globe looking for every guru, every shaman, every healer I could find to understand what I thought there was something wrong with me.
Ask you something here, because there will be people that can relate to exactly what you're saying, and then there will be people that just cannot. And I want to understand, do you think that from your experience, is it because we sometimes end up doing things that we think we should in life, but it's not our calling, or it's not authentically us? Or like, where does this sort of crisis come up for some people?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I was chasing money and status. Growing up as a child, I looked at my father as the engineer, the provider for the house, and I thought, okay, that's success, strong, stoic, doesn't show emotions. And I looked at my mother and my sister as very sensitive, emotional creatures, and I thought, right, emotions dangerous, feeling my feelings, a risk to my success. And so I silenced my feelings, my needs, my wants, and I pushed full steam ahead to getting the hardest degree I could, thinking
Mhm.
that that was what it meant to succeed in life was to get a good degree. I didn't even think about what I enjoyed doing, passions, happiness. It was sort of an afterthought in my desperate quest to climb the corporate ladder and achieve status. So absolutely, it's the idea of what we think we want versus what our true calling really is. And for my own, in my own journey, I found that I was definitely not in alignment with what my soul was really longing to do. And it was a wake-up call, essentially, my body breaking down, saying, we can't continue like this and we need to make a change.
Mm. And it's interesting because some people can go on, to do that, and nothing happens and nothing really destabilizes them, and it's perfectly fine. But then some other people have a journey through exactly what you've just shared, and those experiences where they come to a point where, it's very clear that they're not living authentically because potentially through our life we haven't gotten to know ourselves. Is that part of it as well? Is it that we are trained from a young age with these ideas and belief systems, and we've never really paused to explore whether those belief systems are actually things that we agree with, or they're just literally systematic cues? Is that kind of...
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, we are programmed pretty much from birth with different beliefs, societal norms, and the things that we think we should do and believe in and strive towards. And in my own experience, it was a complete neglect and disregard to my true authentic nature and what I really wanted and what I really enjoyed. I was really mirroring what I thought society wanted of me. And having grown up in a household where money was a topic of discussion, and my parents filed bankruptcy when I was a kid, and I watched the fear of financial instability almost tear my parents apart. So I promised myself I would do whatever it took to get the best degree, to make the most amount of money, because in my mind, having financial stability was the most important thing. Again, happiness was not part of that equation.
So some of us are actually lucky that we get that wake up call. And if I just reflect on everything you've shared, Ali, like I'd say you're one of the lucky ones that hit that brick wall or had that, physical expression of pain, right? Or whatever, where your body told you that this was not sustainable. And then what happened? Where from there? Like you pretty much got to a point where you knew, because for whatever, actually talk us through that. What was it?
Yeah.
Was it physical? Was it emotional? Was it how did stress and anxiety show up in your life?
Yeah, well, it was quite an experience. So there were mornings where I would wake up covered in hives. I was so stressed. I was at a point in my career where it was, I was saying yes to everything. I wanted my boss to like me. I wanted to get promoted. So I was saying yes left, right, and center. I was doing all the things, and my mind was so overactive. I had barely even started my meditation practice at that time. And so I was overwhelmed with stress that my body was physically allergic to it, and it was resulting in full breakout of hives every morning. And I would have, yeah, anxiety attacks. I'd wake up on the weekends. It was like weekdays were spent kind of spinning in this perpetual state of fight or flight, of survival, of, as a program manager, it's like track this, track that, meeting in London, meeting in the US, meetings, 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 meetings. And then, you're trying to cover all the bases. And then come weekend, it's like you just spin right off that hamster wheel and you're like, whoa, what am I doing with my life? I'm slowing down, so now I can sit in the sun. But for me, I was numbing myself with alcohol, with sugar, with things that are not necessarily good for me. And so I would spend my weekends just trying to fill that void of that emptiness that I felt. It was like corporate was filling this massive chunk of my week, and then on my weekends, it was like, well, what do I actually want to do? I just want to sleep and stare at the walls because I am so exhausted. So it was a huge wake up call that this is not the way to go. And to your point, 100%. I think some people realize this on their deathbed, that they spent their entire lives working a job that just chipped away at their soul for what? For safety, stability, and security. And I get it. Those are important factors to have. And absolutely, if you have a family and you have kids, it's very difficult to just up and quit your job and sell all your belongings. But luckily for me, I was in a situation where I had just ended a relationship. It was actually a very painful ending. That was a big catalyst to the YOLO, I'm leaving on a one-way ticket. But essentially, it was a loud enough wake up call, and yeah, I'm incredibly grateful that it happened when it did, as opposed to on my deathbed.
Ali, what would you say to people? Because I'm sure you have clients. This is, more normal than we think, right? To have these conversations. Obviously, you're in the area, so you're speaking to clients all the time that are wanting to get off this rat wheel or Ferris wheel of stress and anxiety. What do you say to people when they think it's normal? Like they haven't come to the stage of or enough awareness of actually this is not normal. How do you kind of like what is your advice to them? Like this is not normal, right? But a
Yeah.
lot of people think this is normal. They think that this is actually a normal part of life for us to live in this constant state of fight and flight.
Yes, 100%. And I have a lot of clients that do come to me with these questions. And, my first response is not to quit your job and sell all your belongings and book a one-way ticket to a foreign country. For some, maybe that is the adequate response. But really, it's looking at what are your daily practices? What are you doing? How are you spending your time, even in between meetings? What foods are you eating? How much sleep are you getting? What are you consuming when it comes to media and music? Programming, as they say, because ultimately, when I was dealing with the height of my stress and in the brink of my sanity, I was not feeding my mind, body, and soul with things that were helping me. In fact, it was the alcohol and marijuana and sugar, and it was only causing my window of tolerance. It's a term that we use quite regularly about that window of tolerance. If it's too narrow, we're one email, one text, we're immediately flipped into hyper arousal, where we're in fight or flight, or hypo arousal, where we're in freeze or fawn. And so for me, my window of tolerance was next to nothing. So it was very easy for me to make radical, dramatic decisions, because I was in a very much so, I don't care, I'm over it. But I think for many of us, we can actually take steps to moderate. Okay, well, what am I eating when I'm stressed? Am I grabbing a box of M&Ms, or am I going to grab some carrots? In between meetings, if I'm stressed, can I pause, close my eyes, and take some deep belly breaths? And can I go to bed early as opposed to reply to emails from my bed late at night? There's so many little things that we can do before we up and throw our arms up in the air and quit everything. There's so much that we can do, and for me, that's why I've been such a huge advocate of breath work and sound healing as an ability to, as a modality to really shift our nervous system and support this more relaxing parasympathetic nervous system response.
I think you make a really good point there because the extreme is, yeah, that up and go and potentially, quitting your job or leaving your career, which you actually really love, but it could be so many other things that are not sort of, I guess, helping you or your situation, right? Um, and then, yeah, it is those little things that we can factor into our day or our lifestyle, which almost those are the things that we can control, those decisions that we can control to bring things into a much more calmer space. So tell us about then the breath work. Like you mentioned sound healing, breath work. How does that sort of interplay? And what are some things that a person can do even day to day to start bringing in some of these practices and awareness into their life?
Great question. So I'll start by sharing my journey into breathwork, because I think it's important to highlight here. And when I left San Francisco and I went traveling, and as I mentioned, I went looking for every guru, every shaman, every healer. I tried everything from, ayahuasca ceremonies in Peru to all sorts of questionable treatments in India to water fasting. I tried a lot of different things. And then I found breathwork, and it was like that anxiety that I had been carrying around with me, that lack of clarity, that brain fog, that confusion, in one deep breathwork session that I went to, it was like all of a sudden I was reconnected. I was plugged back into something so much greater than the mind, the small self, the ego. It was like a remembrance of our true nature. And for me, it was just this aha moment of, we are all connected. It's all good. There's nothing to worry about. We are supported. And I was going on this solo quest around the world. Who am I? What is my purpose? And then it was like, oh no, it's not about me. It's about us. And we are all connected. So the breath work was a huge pivotal shift for me. And in finding something, because I'm a total bliss junkie. If something is good and feels good and helps me in my practice, I'm going to follow it and I'm going to study it. And so that's what really kicked off my journey into studying breath work. And for those who aren't familiar with breath work, it's there's many different techniques, but as the yogis call it, pranayam is the Sanskrit term for the extension or the exercise of one's life force. And breath in many languages is synonymous with life force, whether it's, ki or chi or prana. Breath is the vehicle by which our life force travels. And, if you look at a baby breathing, they're breathing nice, big belly breaths. And as we age, and the general side effect of being a spirit in a human body with the stressors of life, and maybe it's genetics, the foods we eat, the life we're living, we move to a really shallow chest breathing pattern. And when we move to this sharp and shallow chest breathing pattern, energy gets stuck in the body. We feel this overwhelming sense of this existential dread, which is exactly what I felt. Why am I here? And I don't even care anymore. And as I mentioned, that window of tolerance, right? When you're doing these continuous, just sharp, shallow chest breathing patterns, you look at the way a dog breathes and you look at their lifespan. You look at the way an elephant breathes and you look at their lifespan, or turtles, it's like long, slow breaths, because breath is life. And the less breaths you take, the longer you live. There've been in different ancient texts that we are given a certain amount of breaths in every life. And really, when we can look at our breath and how we're breathing and bring more awareness into our day-to-day breathing patterns, we can really shift our mind, because our mind is a direct correlation to how we're breathing and vice versa. So for me, it's looking at kind of the twofold approach to mental health and well-being, is the bottom up and the top down. So top down approach is the meditation, controlling the mind from the top down to support the body. And when you look at bottom up, that's breath work, that's ice baths, that's sound healing, that's exercise, that's yoga. It's things where you can physically support the body and move energy, or support the down regulation of the nervous system to, again, promote well-being and health in the body. So for me, I was very impatient with the top-down meditation. I mean, I spent 10 days meditating 10 hours a day at a center in Sri Lanka, another one of those wild and wacky things I tried to ease my troubled mind. And I found with breath work, it was like I was straight to day 7 in that 10-day Vipassana. And it was only in a matter of 45 minutes I was able to get there. And the secret sauce with this breath work is, there's so many different types. As I mentioned, there's, the alternate nostril breathing, there's the breath of fire, there's they call samavriti, where you're just counting the breaths in to equal duration breath out. The breath work that I'm talking about is deep, continuous cyclic breathing. It's similar to, you may have heard of Wim Hof, the Iceman, where you're doing these it's continuous. There's no pause at the end and pause at the top. It's just moving the breath. And we call it superventilation, as a fancy term for hyperventilating. And what we're doing when we do this breath work for a continued amount of time, say 30 minutes, anywhere from 15 minutes onwards, we start to quiet the prefrontal cortex, the thinking brain, the neocortex. And when we quiet the prefrontal cortex, we allow the sensory wisdom of our bodies to take over and to heal ourselves, because our bodies are so wise. And yet in today's society, we are thinking ourselves into dis-ease and disorder and chaos, and all sorts of, depression and anxiety, and all these things are really side effects of the mind. I mean, unless you literally drop a hammer on your foot, or you have some sort of pre-existing condition, odds are it's all ties back to our mind. And if we can quiet the mind, we can heal the body. And for many of us, we don't find meditation very easy. And the idea of sitting quietly with oneself is the most horrific thing we could ever do. That's why we're reaching for food, snacks, phone, alcohol, anything to occupy ourselves, because God forbid we are stuck with ourselves in silence for any longer than a few moments. So that for me has been just such a beautiful, beautiful part of breath work, is to be able to quiet my mind and to let my body take over. And that plug, like I said, that plug back into that source grid, call it spirit, call it whatever religion, whatever you want to call it. But for me, it's that essence, that intelligence that connects us all. And it's just it's a really important thing to plug back into. We get so separate and disconnected. So yeah, it's been huge for me.
So when someone is starting out on this journey of exploring breath work to relieve anxiety and bring down their stress levels, what is the easiest exercise that they can do? Where should they start off? That is non-confrontational,
Yes.
slightly more scientific. I think it's
Yeah.
actually all scientific though, isn't it?
It is, and there's been a plethora of studies out now. Thankfully, in 2023, we have tons of data supporting this. But for most of my clients who are just starting out, I generally recommend what's called heart coherence breathing, and this breathing technique was studied by the Heart Math Institute, and they study the effects of what happens when our brain waves coincide or align with our heart rhythms. And so, essentially, what they found is when our brain waves and our heart rhythms are out of sync, we are emitting a static signal out into this field, this frequency, the universe. Because, at the end of the day, we have now proven that everything in the universe is vibrational. That's, why sound healing is such a powerful modality, which we can chat about after. But essentially, when we bring coherence to our heart rhythms and our brain waves, we can then create a clear signal. And from that clear signal, we can emit whatever we want to create into the universe, and we can also bring peace, we can bring stillness, we can ease, any sort of stress, provide clarity, clear brain fog, all sorts of things. And this technique is very simple. It's just a matter of breathing in and out for 5 seconds in, 5 seconds out. And the important indication here, while we call it heart coherence, is to visualize the breath as if it's coming into your heart and out of your heart. Because what happens is we are often so focused in our mind, we are not in our bodies, we are outside our bodies, we are living, in the future or in the past, but we are not physically embodied. And this is why we have a lot of adrenal issues and a lot of physical issues, because we're not really living present in our bodies. And so with this breath technique, a gentle 5 in, 5 out, just bringing awareness. I like to visualize kind of an orb of golden light at the center of your chest. And as you breathe in, just visualize this orb expanding at the center of your chest for the count of 5, and then contracting for the count of 5. Another great practice that you can do first thing when you wake up, because for me, first thing when you wake up is like the most susceptible place for anxiety or panic. You wake up from a deep sleep and then you realize, oh no, I have this due, or I have that, and these people depend on me and whatnot. And so what's really important to do first thing in the morning, just take 5 deep belly breaths. Again, it's bringing the breath out of the sharp and shallow chest and back down into the belly. And when we breathe deep belly breaths, we're supporting our parasympathetic nervous system for rest and digest. We're telling our bodies it's safe. And it's super simple and super gentle and doesn't require any guidance or support.
Yeah, I think some of these techniques are going to be really useful for our listeners. I think also because a lot of them you can start off just with a few minutes. That you don't have to overcommit. It can be just as little as like 3 to 5 minutes of awareness and bringing that awareness back into your own breath, right? And deepening that breath so it's not kind of remaining at the top half of your body. Yeah, am I?
Exactly. Yes. And visualizing the breath and allowing it to, yeah, journey, to visualize it, to watch it move. And it's very similar when you think of a meditative practice of breath watching, just in and out. But in this case, you're not just watching it, you're controlling it and pulling it deeper into the lower abdomen so that you're getting that real restorative deep belly breaths.
Hmm.
Um,
I'm feeling relaxed just listening to you. So I can't imagine how relaxing the practices would be to do with you. So tell us about sound healing. You mentioned that it's interconnected to sound healing, the breath work, and there is obviously that whole thing around frequency and energy as well with sound. How is that useful when we're thinking about regulating our emotions and our emotional health?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, sound healing is based on the principle that everything in the universe is vibrational. And so when we work with different sounds, so sound healing, for those who aren't familiar, involves the use of different instruments such as crystal singing bowls. You can see some behind me in my treatment room here. Medicine drums, flutes, gongs, chimes. I also work with my voice. Because out of all the instruments on the planet, our voices are actually the most healing, which I'll chat briefly about for voice activation if we have time. But when it comes to sound healing, our bodies are so responsive and receptive to sound and frequencies because, again, quantum physics has proven that we're all just a big collection of waves vibrating at different frequencies from one moment to the next. And when it comes down to it, it's really we're all just, it's a probability of being somewhere at an atomic cellular level. And so when we work with sound, we can use sound different frequencies to promote a more relaxed state in the body, to down regulate our nervous system. There's also this thing called brainwave entrainment, which happens so if a client is receiving a sound healing session, I would call it more of a theory on brainwave entrainment, but it's essentially that the brain waves of the client will start to respond to the frequencies being played by the practitioner, and we'll start to mimic that rhythm so it becomes in more harmonic resonance. So in doing so, again, it goes back to creating more harmony in the mind, in the body, and more resonance between the brain waves, the neural connections, and just supporting your overall well-being.
Mm-hmm. That's fantastic. And Ali, just as we wrap up, this conversation's been so interesting, and I think we can talk in a lot more depth in some of these concepts. But if you were to reflect on sound healing breath work, how can individuals just bring some of these techniques into their well-being plan? So think about a high strung up, like professional executive in their 5-day working week when they're at the peak of stress. How do they bring in some of these practices into their day-to-day?
I have one beautiful recommendation that will combine all of my favorite modalities in one, and it's a very simple practice, chanting of Om. Om is the seed sound of all creation. You've probably heard it in a yoga class where you chant Om and you're not quite sure why you're doing it. But when we talk about actually what's happening, so when we're using our voices, when we're working with breath work, one thing that is happening is we're stimulating the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is the major highway from our brains to every organ in our body. And so when we can support our vagal tone, we can support our nervous system, we can reduce stress, we can promote brain clarity, and enhance mental performance, all of these things with this simple practice. And again, as I said with the breath work, when we're extending our exhales, we are stimulating that rest and digest, that parasympathetic nervous system. So with the chanting of Om, it's just taking a deep breath in and then releasing with a Om and continuing that as long as you can. And what this is doing is not only is it extending your exhale for a longer duration than your inhale, because that's the equation for down regulating your nervous system, is an extension of the exhale. Not only are you extending the exhale, but you're also stimulating the vagus nerve by way of the vocal cords. So you're creating this vibrational resonance in your body through your voice and extending your breath. So it doesn't require any timer. It doesn't require any meditative practice. It's just simply sitting there and chanting Om. You don't have to have a singing practice. It doesn't need to sound good. It doesn't need to hit any particular note. All that matters is that you're allowing vibrations in the back of your throat to emanate out. And what you'll find is this incredibly calming effect that happens maybe just a few minutes. When I first started my journey, when I was in San Francisco, I would literally I had no idea what I was doing, but I would go book a conference room in the height of my stress in between meetings, and I would just sit there and Om. And because I didn't know how to meditate, I didn't know anything about breath work, but something intuitively said, this is just what we're going to do. I went to one yoga class, I think, and I was like, this is just what I'm going to do. And I was like, okay, there's something to this. So if there's any technique that I will, share for a quick fix in between whatever you're doing, just chanting Om is incredibly helpful. It's bringing that sound element, it's bringing your voice, and it's bringing the breath work all in one.
This is a really simple one. And Ali, for the more complex ones that requires a bit more guidance, where can people find you?
Yeah, so they can find me at aliskiba.com, or also my Insta handle is the Melodious Yogi, Melodious also melodiousyogi.com. So that is where you can book in, you can contact for private functions, events, one-on-ones. Yeah, I'm here to share this medicine with as many people as I can.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Ali.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, listeners, for today. I hope that you enjoyed the episode and it provided you valuable insights, strategies, and inspiration to enhance your personal and professional life. Taking control of our physical and mental well-being is quite a journey, and it requires dedication and practice. We encourage you to implement some of the learnings from today's episode into your daily life, as small steps really do lead to significant positive changes. Make sure to stay tuned for upcoming episodes where we'll continue to explore growth strategies, resilience building, workplace wellness, and more. Together, we hope to create a community focused on self-growth, well-being, and building meaningful relationships with others and also with ourselves. Thank you for being part of the Leora family, and until next time, take care and keep thriving.